New York Giants fans, not the result that the Giants wanted after what I believed was a game that, if they had done some things better, was a winnable game. Um, we'll talk a little about the game plan, or at least seemingly what the game plan was. We'll talk a little bit about the execution. We'll talk some players. We'll talk some reactions. We'll do it all right here. I'm Coach Gene Clemons, and I have a giant issue. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of A Giant Issue. I'm Coach Gene Clemons. New York Giants on SI. That's where you get all of your New York Giants news and information from. Make sure you go and check out everything that we have over there. Make sure you check out my three plays, the three plays that essentially doomed the opportunity for the Giants to win. Look at my stats. That's the 4 to 5 stats from the game that point to why they lost. I look forward to being able to give you the 4 or 5 stats that point to why they won here soon. But I think it's important to understand that we have to start with what we've known the entire time. Right? Let's start there. We have to start with what we've known the entire time, and make sure that you are following me on X. Make sure that you're following me on Blue Sky, on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, at Gene Clemons, or at Coach Gene Clemons on YouTube. Make sure that you're coming over here to the YouTube channel and subscribing here. Everybody went into this season saying that this was a really difficult schedule. And then somewhere along the line, hope sprung eternal. And that's great. Like, it's great to feel good about your team, to feel hopeful about your team. I think the issue that we have is that people don't remember their initial feelings before the fandom came into play. Before the fandom came into play, everybody said this is the most difficult schedule in all of football. That was before you lost Malik Neighbors for the season, right? That is before you lost Cam Scatterbo for the season. That is before you knew you were going to be trotting a rookie quarterback out there. That was before you knew that one of the main defensive acquisitions on the defensive line was not going to play essentially all season. That was before you were going to have injuries at linebacker to Michael McFadden and then to Darius Muasau. That was before you knew that you were going to have not only your number one cornerback, but your number two cornerback, your starting safety out. Before all of those things happened, New York Giants fans and content creators alike all said, hey, this is going to be the most difficult schedule that the Giants have played. It's one of the more difficult schedules in all of football. And guess what? Just because those teams haven't been as good as advertised doesn't mean they're not good. The 49ers team that this team just lost to by 10 points is a good football team, even though they're dealing with injuries. I hear people say things like, well, the 49ers are dealing with injuries and they still seem to make things happen. Yeah, they're better than the Giants. It's not a diss on the Giants. Nobody went into this season and said the Giants were going to be better than the 49ers. So now why is it all of a sudden a surprise when you lose to the 49ers? It was a surprise to beat Philadelphia the way that the Giants beat Philadelphia in week 6. It was not a surprise that Philly beat the Giants in week 8, the way that they beat the Giants. They beat the Giants with a run game. That same rushing attack that they just won a Super Bowl off of. What are we talking about? Everybody knew what to expect. And now all of a sudden, people are acting like, oh, this is much worse than we expected. No, it's not. This is infinitely better than last year. This team wasn't in games last year. They weren't scoring touchdowns last year. This team, without its best weapon in Malik Neighbors, without its second best offensive weapon outside of the quarterback in Cam Scatterbo, without their best pass catching tight end, in my opinion, with their second tight end out there dropping passes, like critical passes, with their defense seemingly not knowing how to run fit, they are scoring points, right? So if the defense was playing better, then this team would be performing better. So why just blanket smother everything and make it seem like everything is bad? Everything is not bad. Now, would you like for the offense to be more consistent? There were, I want to say, 4 drives, right? There was 4 drives. Well, really 5 if you think about it, in the first half after they scored the opening touchdown, where it was 3 or 4 plays, I believe I counted it up, and the 5 drives were 17 to 18 plays that they ran in those 5 drives. Well, I mean, that's why you lose games, right? The inconsistency. But why is it inconsistency? Because you have an inconsistent quarterback who's not always the most accurate, right? You have inconsistency in the weapons, guys that are in and out of the lineup because of injury. You have inconsistency in performance, guys dropping the ball, right? You have inconsistency on the offensive line, guys missing blocks, guys getting beat. So, like, offensively, you can understand why there's inconsistency, right? There's inconsistency on the offense because there's a lot of things fluctuating, and you got a rookie quarterback out there. I don't think, and I know I'm in the minority, but I don't think this is the time to just sit back and like dwell on who the coach is going to be next year, or like what they're going to do, with this, with this team in 2026. To me, you are wasting the opportunity to grow with the team if right now, halfway through the season, or just a tilt over halfway through the season, right, 9 games, you just start thinking about 2026. Like, I know that in a way New York Giants fans have kind of made their bones or kind of gotten a reputation for just being miserable, right? But you don't have to be. Like, you don't have to be miserable. You can focus on the positives that are coming from this season, right? You can focus on the things that are going right. You can focus on um Brian Burns having a defensive player of the year or defensive MVP type of season, right? He is a, for sure, AP first team, like, all pro right now. You can focus on Kayvon Thibodeau, like, having his best, most like consistent all around season. You can focus on the fact that Cordell Flott, when healthy, was playing really good football, right? As the cornerback that was kind of jettisoned off but didn't go anywhere and has continued to get better and better. Y'all don't remember this because you seem to never remember any of the positive things that this regime says, right? But they thought Cordell Flott was a starting cornerback. They moved him last season from the slot. Well, they had him starting his first season. Then they moved him to the slot, right? They moved him to the slot because they had Banks and they had, right? So they moved him to the slot, but the whole purpose was to get him back outside again. And in 2024, it was supposed to be Banks and it was supposed to be Flott. And then throughout the year, they said, hey, you know what? It's not good enough. It's not good enough. They went out and got Paulson Adebo. They let Banks and Flott fight it out. Flott won. Right? Flott won. You can focus on that positive. You can focus on the positives of a Wan'Dale Robinson, like seemingly being back to a dynamic level. How do you get on the ball? You can talk about Slayton and his consistency or inconsistency that people think he has, which when you look at the stats don't make any sense. But okay, cool. And you can look at those and go, hey, that's a good wide receiver 2-3 combo. Hell, if you want to diss him, say that's a great wide receiver 3-4 combo. If you want to diss him. There's positives to look at with this team. But if all you do is focus on the negatives, then you are your own worst enemy when it comes to enjoying the season. There's 8 games left. I hear people already talking about the draft. It's 8 games. And I know they posted that graphic that showed the last 4 seasons or the 4 seasons, how the season has started for for Brian Dable. It was 7-2, then 2-7, 2-7, 2-7. But we can't just sit and act like there were not circumstances around those 2-7s. You can't act like there wasn't circumstances around those 2-7s. That first 2-7 came with the left tackle getting hurt and the quarterback getting hurt in succession. They spent that season like rolling through dudes, right? Rolling through dudes at quarterback. Most of the season, not only did the left tackle get hurt, but everybody on the offensive line was injured. Everybody. At one point in time, they had 5 backups on the offensive line out there. They had to put Tommy DeVito on the field. That is how hurt they were. These aren't excuses. These are circumstances that lead you to 2-7. You can't just forget that because you're mad about the outcomes right now. Right? In 2024, what happened that facilitated the losing on the team? I'll tell you what happened. They got worse because they let go of Saquon Barkley. They thought that they could make it up in the aggregate. They couldn't. It was a hit. And then they started dealing with injuries again. Right? Injuries to the left tackle. Then DJ wasn't good. Hey, I'm glad he's good in Indiana. At least he was good up until this week. And then he looked like regular old Daniel Jones again. You know what? I'm going to address some things because I think it's important. And y'all know my ADHD brain is just all over the place. But Those 2-7 seasons have reasonings for them, right? This 2-7 season has reasoning. I'm not saying that the regime shouldn't be fired. I'm not saying that changes shouldn't be made at the top. I'm saying that why are you worried about that right now? Why are you spending week in, week out worried about that? I want to get to some things that people have said. I had someone hit me up and say, I love it. The success of Daniel Jones has made Giants fans appreciate Jackson Dart more. I thought that was an interesting take, right? The success of Daniel Jones before this past week has made people appreciate Jackson Dart more, and that they really liked that part. I'll say this about that, right? Because it's interesting. It's an interesting way to think about it. But I think it's unfair to act as if in year one, everybody wasn't on board with Daniel Jones, because they were. I was here. I saw it. After that first season of Daniel Jones, people thought they had their quarterback. And then came season 2, where he regressed, and season 3, where he regressed. Right? There came the injuries because he was a crash test dummy when he ran. That was a part of what made people start going, maybe this dude isn't the guy, right? There were his own comments about seeing ghosts that made people go, maybe this dude is not the guy. Right? That's what happened. Those first three, that first season, it was promise. 24 touchdowns that season. Just barely over 3,000 yards, but that's cool. 24 passing touchdowns that season. 12 interceptions. From there, it was 11 touchdowns and 10 touchdowns. And not even 3,000 yards. And so, yeah, people started wondering. And then came 2022, where he had his breakout season, which we know it is still not to the level of what quarterbacks are doing in the league when they are like amongst the top 10, right? Even if you add in the rushing numbers, right? Even if you add in the rushing numbers, it's still not to that level. It's still not to the level you would want it to be at for for what we were calling an elite level quarterback, a top 10 quarterback. And off that 2022 season, where they went 9-6-1, Saquon Barkley was fantastic. Daniel Jones was solid. 15 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Added another 7 touchdowns on the ground, another 700 yards. So almost a 4,000 yard total season, not 25 touchdowns. Like, think about this. He had 22 touchdowns in that 2022 season. Right? He had 22 touchdowns in that 2022 season. He had 26 touchdowns as a rookie. Like, so that's what it was. So then we watched him leave, and all of a sudden start having this historic like season for him. Not a historic season for the top 10, but just a really, really good season for him. And like a lot of the fan base was doing victory laps about, hey, we told you, Daniel Jones. So yeah, people are going to look at their quarterback and go, all right, well, what did we miss? Or you should. But the success of Daniel Jones this season, not including this past week, where he was absolutely freaking terrible. Not this past week, but before this week. The success of Daniel Jones is not the failure of the Giants. It's the failure of Daniel Jones. Because he had every opportunity to be successful here. Let's not act as if Brian Dable was his coach for 6 straight years. Let's not act like people were not calling him like or comparing him to Lamar Jackson in 2022. I've been here the entire Daniel Jones experience. I know what you guys were doing. So you can't blame him on the regime. You got to blame him for him. Right? You got to blame him for him. I also have seen people talk about the dysfunction because coaches and players want to defend themselves. Like, why are y'all surprised that coaches and players want to defend themselves when you say abjectly stupid things? Like things that don't make any sense in the grand scheme of things. Things that I'm just supposed to let you get off this lie. Right? It's bad enough that I see Giants media members waste questions in the Q&As on gotcha moments, trying to create gotcha moments or trying to put people in awkward situations. I saw somebody ask Brian Dable, was he crying? Why? Why? If he said yes, what's the story? Brian Dable cries. Like, what's the story? I heard a reporter ask Jackson Dart, and I don't know who these reporters were because I'm just listening to the audio, right? I heard a reporter ask Jackson Dart if he felt pressure to win for Brian Dable because they have a special relationship. And, does he feel first off, how do you know they have a special relationship? How do you know that relationship is special? I've seen Brian Dable be like that with me. Like that jovial, like joking around, playful Brian Dable. That dude that we see do that with Jackson Dart, he's done that with me, and he doesn't know me from a hole in the wall. The only thing he knows about me is when I show up to the press conference, he's going to ask a good question. He's going to ask some football questions. That's what he knows about Emory Hunt from Football Game Plan. That's what he knows about Lawrence Jackson. There's certain people that coaches can identify and go, that person is going to ask some football stuff. And that facilitates somebody feeling a little bit better, but it doesn't mean you have a special relationship. How do you know what type of relationship Jackson Dart has with Brian Dable? And furthermore, why do you think that Jackson Dart has to feel pressure to win because of that when he just feels the pressure to win because he knows that people aren't really, that there's some people out there that may not be sold on him being the starting quarterback in New York? Like, that's the only pressure you need. How do you know that he just doesn't have internal pressure to win because he's super competitive and he wants to be great? That's all the pressure you need. So to try to make it into some type of soap opera drama thing by asking a question like that. Number one, there's no way to answer that question well. Even the answer that he said, oh, well, I can only worry about me. Somebody could twist and go, Jackson Dart's not worried about whether or not Brian Dable gets fired. They can twist that. But clearly you know what he meant. When you ask questions like that, you're looking for a particular result. Those are trash questions. And I don't care if the people who ask them are people who I like. If some of my best friends in this industry, if they ask questions like that, I would have problems with it. And I would be like, yo, man, why are you wasting the time on a question like that? Why are you wasting your time on a question like that? One of the other criticisms I've seen is that the offense is predictable. The offense is predictable. So if the offense is so predictable, then why can't they predict it out the gate? Why has this offense had so much success on the first drive? If the offense is so predictable, why is it that it's not predictable all the time? Why is it that they're scoring more points? They're scoring more points now than they did last year. Was it not predictable last year when they were scoring less points? How is it predictable now? See, people say things and then they just throw them up on social media, right? They just throw things up on social media. Like I look at this stuff. Somebody sent me the video of Deonte Banks getting ran over by a running back that's 30 pounds heavier than him, that had a full head of steam while he was trying to get in position because the run fits were wrong and Dane Belton fit on the wrong side so that the guy had the opportunity to go outside instead of going back in. They sent it to me and went, oh, you still defending Deonte Banks? Yeah, I am. That was one play with a cornerback versus a power back. With the cornerback flat-footed and the power back with a full head of steam. And you're telling me that's the reason y'all mad at Deonte Banks? Because he didn't make that tackle when you were already down 20-10? Was Deonte Banks getting burnt all day and I missed it? Because the last time I checked, his number one job is to play defensive back, is to cover. Where are the safeties? Like, why do y'all get angry over something that you know is going to happen? If Deonte Banks is so bad, which a lot of you claim he is the worst, right? He's the worst. Okay, cool. Let's operate in the world that he's the worst. But they have no other choice but to put him out there because the starting cornerback is hurt and the number 2 cornerback is hurt. If they're putting Banks out there and a guy that they drafted in the 7th round, don't you think they deserve a little bit of like grace? Because clearly they're not the number ones. Nope. Nuh-uh. Oh, I know why. It's because Banks was taken with a 1st round draft pick and they moved up to take him, right? Why do y'all always continue to go back to the draft? Right? How about this? Deonte Banks is 23 years old. There are a lot of college football players that are coming out of college at 23 and 24 years old. He's 23 years old. All he's heard since he's been here is negativity. Outside of the first season when people liked him kinda. All he's heard is negativity. What about maybe a positive approach? What about some love, some encouragement? some respect. All Jalen Hyatt has heard is negativity. I'm one of them. All Evan Neal has heard is negativity. And yet, week after week, we see former Giants, guys who flamed out with New York, other places succeeding. And you guys will dumb it down to the simplistic, oh, it's just hard to play in New York. What? Number one, they don't play in New York. They play in New Jersey. And I've been to that area. It ain't hard over there. A lot of you guys who are quote unquote hard are soft as Charmin in person. You're the nicest people in the world. You're the nicest people in the world. When people see you in person, it's only behind the keyboard that y'all are really, really tough. Y'all are nice, you're accommodating, you're sweet, you're loving. How about throw some of that out there? Right? Throw some of that out there for all of these people that you think, hey, listen, I'm not saying don't be critical, but you can be critical with love. You can be critical without calling people names, without saying that they don't care, without saying that they're not trying hard, because that's just not true. If Deonte Banks wasn't trying hard, he doesn't step in front of Brian Robinson to get ran slap over. He tries to move to the side, right, and arm tackle him. Nope. He stood in front of the train, and the train ran him over. Where was the help? Where was the help? There's a lot of things that are wrong with this team, right? There are a lot of things that are wrong with these teams. But you knew that already. You knew it. You convinced yourself that they didn't exist the closer we got to the start of the season. I saw the shift. Man, I'm starting to feel real good about this team. Without them ever playing a game, without them ever lining up, I feel real good about what the product is. This could be the year. 2 games into the season, the coaching staff, front office panics. Let's go with the rookie. If that's the case, you should have started that way. You got a Jameis Winston on the bench just rotten as a number 3 quarterback. He's the number 3 quarterback still. You know you're not putting Russell Wilson back out there. Yet Jameis Winston is still the number 3 quarterback. You got Jameis Winston playing the role of mascot. While all these teams have quarterback injuries and you haven't flipped one of these 2 veteran quarterbacks that could, you want to get into why you should be mad at the front office? Those are the reasons. Not because of the play that's bad, because you thought they were going to be bad at the beginning of the year. You just convinced yourselves that they had a good chance. And guess what? You should convince yourself that they have a good chance in the second half. I don't want to hear this tanking stuff. I want to see people go out and I want to see people perform. That's what I hope. What do you hope? What do you want to see for the second half? Leave it in the comments. Y'all are always willing to comment. I'm always willing to respond. Make sure that you go over to the New York Giants on SI. Check out everything that we do over there. Hit me up on social media at Gene Clemons. Let's rap. Hit me at Blue Sky. I'm trying to really get more of the Blue Sky popping. I'll be really active over there as well. Until next time, I'm Coach Gene Clemons, and I have a giant issue.